Welcome to Channeling Your Sacred Rage. My name is Sophia Leva-Marie with Nurturing Divine Beauty, and I have with me Veronica Monet from the Shame Free Zone, and we're talking about anger, which is perfect when technology is not working.
Oh my God, I've just been feeling very angry about this, as a matter of fact. Angry and embarrassed. And you know, it's interesting about anger. Sometimes that is kind of a secondary emotion because we're sometimes afraid, or we're embarrassed, or we're sad, and then we get angry as a way of coping with those emotions. So I was definitely feeling afraid that we wouldn't get this going right. And then I was starting to get frustrated. And then I was feeling embarrassed, like we let down all these people. They're here at 1:30 and they got a bunch of nonsense going on, or nothing. So, yeah. Yes. So next thing you know, you're angry.
And we're actually talking about a deeper anger. Yes, the technology has been frustrating today, but we're talking about a deeper anger that has gone across the nation, that has really created such a turmoil from the Me Too movement. It was so necessary and so important, yet there was so much shock and so much anger, and people were finding out that, you know, it happened in their families or with their neighbors, or all these people that they didn't even know have had this trauma. And what do they do with it? Now that the anger's up, now that the emotions are out and they're being released, then what do you do with it so it's not destructive, so it's actually creating more change? And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yes, and one of the things that I really want to bring to the fore here is the fact that when there is sexual abuse trauma, oftentimes because of our female training, our female patterning culturally, we have had a tendency to blame ourselves, to feel guilty that we did something to cause whatever was done to us. Mm-hmm. And so we don't, you know, initially contact that anger. We become shame-based and kind of withdrawn, perhaps, and women have a high incidence of depression, which oftentimes comes out of this tendency to sublimate the anger, because it's just not an acceptable emotion for women to express. And what we're seeing with Me Too now is this huge explosion of moving past the shame and the self-doubt and the self-blame, and moving into, no, you did this to me. What you did was horrible. I didn't deserve it. I didn't do anything to cause this. You're a perpetrator, and that's what you do. And to really contact that anger and the momentum of that, of rising out of the depths of shame and depression into rage, is, in my view, righteous and sacred. This is absolutely sacred rage. Yes. And of course, what you and I want to share with people today, Sophia, is how we have made that journey in its entirety, and realized at some point too that if we just stay in rage, we never get to pleasure and joy. So, but I just wanted to highlight that it's so important for women moving away from shame and depression.
Yes, yes. And often we're afraid of it, because it seems like it would be so destructive if you really go into that rage. But there's a different way to go into it. There is the rage that's vengeful and blames and causes more chaos. And then there's the rage that actually is a catalyst for change, that actually gets it out of your body and actually is channeled toward creating something different. And that's where we really want to tap into, is the sacred part of it, the part where it actually creates change for you and for others.
Yeah, well, I think it's all sacred. I think that momentum of moving into the rage is a sacred process. Mm-hmm. But if it gets stuck there, then, as you know, it can lead to chronic illness. Mm-hmm. and even death. And I wonder if this would be a great time, actually, for me to ask you a few questions about your personal journey around what it was like when you got in contact with your anger around having been raped.
Yeah.
Would you share that story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the first questions I have for you, I just want to, can you take us into the doctor's office when he told you that you had 2 weeks to live?
Yes, definitely fast forwarding. I had just come out of a birthday party the night before. It was the day after my 34th birthday. And I had gotten a physical for a job, and they had given me a call and said, you need to go to the emergency room. Your blood level is dangerously low. So I actually went into like the spiritual bypass and was like, oh, I can deal with that. I was like, I'll just get some iron. I'll do some pranic healing. It'll be fine. And my friend and I were going somewhere, and she's like, oh no, you need to actually go, which I'm really glad that she did. And I went to the emergency room, and yes, the doctor came in and said, you're hemorrhaging so much that we're not even sure how you're functioning, and that you have 2 weeks to live. And my reaction was just blank. There was no thought. There was no anger. There was nothing. It was just like, I mean, there was the initial like, well, shit. What do you say to that? And then it was just like blank.
Wow. Yeah. So I don't get how you connected that blankness, that hopelessness that you only had 2 weeks to live with the healing journey that you went through around your rape. How, take us step by step, how do you start realizing you're not going to take that doctor's summation, you're not going to let that be your reality, that you're going to live, that you're going to move past this? That in itself is huge. How did you find the energy for that? And then second of all, how do you connect it to the rape?
Well, you know, I kind of sat in this space of being in the question of, do I want to let go? Because it was certainly easier. It would have been easier to let go. I could have just been like, all right, well, this is it. I made it to 34. Awesome. And then just been done with it. But I looked inside and said, is this where I want it to end? Is this the space where I want to leave my life? And it was no, that I didn't want to have it be the end. I didn't want to just give up my life. And then I was like, okay, well, what do I do next? So I was like, okay, I'm making the choice to live. And now I need to talk the doctor into it, because I needed multiple transfusions, I needed surgery, and they were not going to do that because they were, you know, positive I wasn't going to make it through. But I had to talk the doctor in and just have that energy, that potency, which is, you know, a shade of your anger and your rage, the potency that, no, this is not my choice. Like, I choose to live, and you're giving me surgery. And then I really had to go on the healing journey where I let everything go. I let my healing practice go. I let the work I was doing go, and I just really had to heal. And it was really going into, okay, I have this life-changing incident, but it was created somewhere. So I had to backtrack. Like, okay, I literally had these, you know, gigantic tumors that were like the size of babies' heads, you know, in me that had to be taken out. But it was like, well, how did they get created? And it was by communion with my body. It was by energy practices, and by really going back, where was this created? Because my intuition was like, this is repressed emotion. It's all the things I stuffed down. So I was like, okay, what are the things that I stuffed down? And one of the major pieces was the rape when I was 20 years old.
And Sophia, those baby head-sized cysts were located where?
They were in my abdomen. So like your sacral chakra, you know, the places where, you know, your safety, your sexuality, your confidence, where those areas are literally connected in your body. That's exactly where they were. And they were literally around my ovaries. They actually told me I'd have to have a hysterectomy as well. But that didn't turn out to be the case either.
Wow. Wow, you're a very powerful woman. Very powerful woman. First of all, I just really want to applaud the level of anger inside of you that even manifested these tumors. Think about the way in which the level of rage and violation that you felt about being raped manifested itself as tumors. And that is also really something I want to bow to as being an amazing act of creation. We were talking about how you connected the tumors in your body through your rape.
Yes.
And how you were able then to, connect to the anger and the rage that was suppressed and had caused those tumors. Tell us, help us understand how you got to the point of saying, okay, these tumors are connected to the rape, and not only am I going to have the doctor do the transfusions and all this other stuff, but what am I going to do with my rage?
Well, I definitely had to connect to my body, because obviously I had really disconnected from my body. I wasn't hearing the signals. Like, I was seeing the signals because I didn't feel good, but I just kept making do. You know, as people in our busy lives, we just do what it takes. So I was exhausted all the time. You know, I knew I felt like crap, but I still did everything that I was required to do. But I had to actually connect to my body, start to have those conversations, and connect to my intuition to ask, where do I find this information? I know it's within me. I know you have the information, body, so I need you to tell me so we're not recreating this. Because I didn't want to have the surgery, have the multiple transfusions, and then just do this again. So I needed to really extrapolate what was happening for me. And by really going within and connecting to the healing energies and really focusing just on my body and my healing, it brought me back to years ago when the rape had happened. Because again, I had the rage and had the anger, and I just didn't address it. I went years, you know, this is like 14 years in the future, and I hadn't addressed it. Even though I had been in the healing world, even though I'd done so much work, that was a piece I had not addressed. And again, I had just stuffed it down, just, you know, it had just been put into my body. And this was something that actually needed to come out, so I didn't keep recreating it.
You know, right there, I just want to say, as a rape survivor myself, I so relate to the desire to not call it a rape. To somehow or another convince ourselves that it was a date that went wrong, or a misunderstanding, or I shouldn't have gotten so drunk, or maybe I actually wanted it to happen. Now, obviously, your rape may not have been in that gray area at all, but I just, for the people that are joining us here, I just wanted to bring to the fore the idea that sometimes we don't want to acknowledge that we've been raped, and that also makes it very difficult to process any of our anger and sadness and grief around it.
Yes.
So Sophie, when you made that connection and you realized, I want to process this rage about having been raped, so that I don't develop more tumors, how did you do that?
It was definitely a lot of energy work. It was physical nourishment, and it was really actually kind of reliving the space I was in during that time, because I had just blocked it out and moved on. So I actually had to feel those emotions for the first time, because how I dealt with it is I shut down. I shut all my emotions off. And that's how I got through it. And then at some point, other emotions began to populate, but I still hadn't addressed it. But I needed to actually thaw those emotions out and actually feel them for the first time.
That sounds like a lot of hard work to me. Did you get a therapist to help you with that, or did you have a spiritual practice to help you with that, or what was it that enabled you to be able to deal with those emotions all those years later when you weren't able to deal with them in the moment? What techniques did you use, in other words?
It was a lot of spiritual practice. For me, I didn't particularly trust a therapist at the time. I just felt it would be a lot of talking. I know people who've gone to therapists for years, and they seem to kind of circle the same issue, and it doesn't get dealt with. And of course, there are certainly other options, and I do know wonderful therapists now, but at that time, that was my point of view. So I looked directly to my spiritual practice. So I brought in chronic healing. I brought in multiple energy healings. I brought in mediumship. I pretty much threw the whole bag of energy work and the dozens of modalities that I had practiced and had learned to help me, because I was always helping someone else heal. But I needed to actually take a step back from that and really work on me, because if I'm to help others, I actually need to be a clear channel myself. I actually need to be more healed so that I can actually be a channel for someone else. And I just knew that I needed to really have divine intervention, because the human thing wasn't really working for me.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I think we all need divine intervention at some time in our life, if not consistently. I know I certainly have. And I know that we were also going to, do you feel complete with that story right now? Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our viewers before we go to my story?
Just one thing I would point out, as you said, for those who aren't looking at the anger they have, a lot of times they do feel angry at others. And I just want to say that's okay. I was angry at my friend. I was angry at God. I was angry at the perpetrators. I was just angry at everyone. And actually allowing yourself to have that anger, not to express it in an unhealthy way, but to have it, is absolutely perfect. And allow yourself to have that. You can be angry at everyone. It's just, how do you actually process it? How do you actually show it? That's what makes the difference.
Yes, it does. Well, you and I talked about sharing my story as an incest survivor. I'm also a rape survivor, but the incest story for me highlights a Me Too moment for me. It really defined my life in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's looking at it from a little bit of a different filter. For me, I was inculcated, groomed is often a word used, by my father
Mm-hmm.
to have no needs or desires. Everything was focused on him and his needs and his desires, including his sexual desires. So the idea of being angry about what was done to me was not even a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
My survival as a young child, because he started molesting me in the form of taking inappropriate photos of me when I was 5 years old. Started fondling my breast when I was 11, and threatening to have intercourse with me when I was probably about 15 or 16. And he actually did rape my sister when she was 13. So this was a very dangerous man, very scary man, but he was my father.
Right.
And growing up in a home like that, what happens is, or at least what happened for me and what happens for a lot of incest survivors, is just a numbing out of my desires and needs and feelings. So I pretty much went through my childhood feeling anxious and depressed. Those are the only two emotions I had. Wasn't aware of being angry at all. And the only person who was allowed to get angry in our home was my dad. And I had a lot of internalized excuses for him. Excuses that came from my mother, excuses that came from him. My mother tried to excuse all of his perpetrations as that he didn't understand how sensitive women's bodies were, and his hands were too big. It was just ludicrous, the extent that she went to. And my dad, well, he had a mantra, which is, I'm your father, I would never do anything to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the belief system that I grew up with, and it took a long, long time to crawl out of that. And I turned to trying to find love and safety through a lot of sexual encounters in my high school and college years, because that's what I thought love was. And I was trying to love these men, these boys, really, let's face it, although I also dated older men, not surprisingly, given the fact that my father had molested me. So I was looking for love and safety in the wrong way. I thought somehow or another that sexual contact would create love and safety, because that was what I had been taught. And I did not realize the ways that I was hurting myself. I had no clue. And I just dug a deeper and deeper hole of self-destruction for myself. So I became a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict. I got arrested and totaled my car and lost a job, and all at the young age of 25. And at the age of 25, I got sober and I got into therapy. And for me, therapy was a godsend. Without the therapy, I probably would have committed suicide. Because that's where my anger took me, was it just took me towards self-destructiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it took time for me and a lot of help on the part of therapists to be able to even have permission to be angry about what my father did to me. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to short circuit that and forgive him too. I remember shortly after I got into therapy and got sober, I called my dad and said, I've forgiven you. And I thought, oh, good, that's done. And no, it wasn't done. There was so much more unpacking that I had to do. A lot of grief, a lot of rage. And since that had transpired my entire life, it took years of therapy, years of support groups, years of 12-step groups, finally get to this place where I was able to say, yes, I have a right to be angry. It's absolutely horrible what he did to me and to my sister. And to be able to contact that anger lifted so much shame and self-blame. And I started to treat myself in a good way. I started to take care of myself and to make myself important and to be in touch with how I feel and what I want and what works for me and what's pleasurable for me. And it's been a huge journey, but that was what anger did for me, to be angry at the perpetrator so that I was free to love myself and to stop accepting unsafe, unloving behavior in an endless, empty quest to try to find love and safety. So my anger led to having boundaries that I didn't have before. Yeah. So I just very grateful for my anger. Now, when I get angry, the first thing I ask myself is, how are my boundaries being violated? That's the thing that I want to look for. How are my boundaries being violated? And in the case of technical difficulties, that doesn't usually apply. But when it comes when it comes to my interpersonal relationships, that's the first place I want to look.
And I love that your journey to anger actually brought you to putting yourself first, because that absolutely is where any healing begins, is actually putting yourself, your needs, your desires as #1 priority. And that's something counterintuitive to our culture, to our families, as women, as the men who've had their own trauma. You know, they're taught to stuff it down as well. And, you know, you're supposed to just suck it up. You know, and all these different things that we're taught as children, as proponents in the social media era that we're in. It's not to put ourselves first, but that's actually absolutely imperative. Like, it's necessary for your healing is to actually take yourself as God. Like, that is your North Star.
That's the full cup that I want to have in order to be able to give to others. I have to put my oxygen mask on first, and then I'm able to give to others.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so when you were actually able to tap into your anger and create these boundaries for yourself, how did that actually shift the trajectory of the relationships you were having?
You know, it's an interesting thing. My father died 2 years ago, and I called him up. He had disowned me when I was 19 years of age, and when I was 29, I tried to go back and visit him because at age 29, I really had I'd spent a good 4 years processing my anger and rage and grief, and I was at a place where I didn't have any resentments towards him. But he did not want to see me. And this is an interesting thing to me. When we're mired in our own shame and guilt, there's a way in which we can project our rage out onto other people too. So although I look for how my boundaries might have been violated, if I can't find them, then I also look at the ways in which I may be not contacting some shame or some guilt. And it's a lot easier to blame somebody else or some other circumstance instead of looking at myself. in my father's case, that's very much what he did. He never looked at himself. He blamed the world. So I didn't talk to him for, I guess, almost 30 years, not quite. And when I heard that he was in a facility and dying, I wanted to reach out to him and express my love. And I did, and he was actually able to receive it. And that just felt to me like such a moment of really realizing the journey I went on to come out of an incestuous home and reclaim my right to my body. And then to also connect with that righteous rage about how abominable it is when a parent does something like that to a child. And then to go to the place where I learned to have boundaries and to take care of myself. And when I'm in my sovereignty, and I know who I am, and I know that I can protect myself, it allows me to actually be more loving, accepting, and open to other people, even the perpetrator. So when my dad died 2 years ago, I didn't have any resentments anymore. I didn't have anything to process. The only thing that I did realize is that my body communicated to me that I'd actually been in a little bit of fear the entire time he was alive. And when I scattered his ashes, the rest of that fear left my body. Yeah. So it was a really powerful moment too. Saying goodbye and scattering his ashes. I think that I got so into that whole journey that I lost track of your question, Sophia. What did you ask me?
That's a good question. I think it was, how did tapping into your anger and creating your own boundaries, how did that actually change your relationship?
Oh, right. Okay. So, well, I guess I did kind of answer your question because I have boundaries and know I'm there to take care of myself. Loving my father became a possibility. Yeah. So that and also knowing that I don't really want to be in the same room with him, but having a conversation over the phone was fine. And that's one of the things that I do now is I pick and choose how much comfort I have with any given person. Maybe I prefer that we keep the relationship kind of in a place where it's a little more superficial, and other people I go deep with. I'm selective about the level at which I share with various different people in my life, or how much access they have to me. And I do that for my own well-being. And it allows me to have a lot of people in my life because I don't just surrender my boundaries in my relationships.
Right. And also, you know, something you brought out with your father is that traumatized people are the ones who traumatize others. So this is why we actually require to let go of this anger and this trauma, because if we don't, we hurt ourselves, and in some way we end up hurting someone else, maybe in a completely different situation, but it's going to come out in some way. So that's why we actually need to get this energy out of our bodies, start to use it as a catalytic force for what you're actually wanting to have for your life. As Veronica's saying, you know, creating boundaries, creating relationships that honor your desires and your needs. But it does have to be addressed. You can't just gloss over it. Like,
oh my God, yes.
We've tried. Like, we've tried. I almost killed myself. Yes, I almost killed myself. We both had self-destructive behaviors, and we were hurting ourselves and we were hurting others until we actually
Oh my God, yes. Yes. By the time I got sober at age 25, I was one angry young woman. Now, I wasn't really connecting that anger to the abuse, but boy, was an angry girl. And angry towards other people and hurting other people and bringing forward that pain into the next generation. Absolutely. These are not things that we want to do. And we're unfortunately doomed to do that unless we heal our own trauma. So thank you, Sophia, for saying that. That is absolutely positively the path that I'm on and what I help my clients with in trying to heal this. And also, by the way, I think we're healing the DNA because epigenetics has shown that we inherit PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from those who came before us, those who passed their genetic code to us. So there's a way in which we all have an inordinate burden of healing to engage in, because it's not just what happened to us in our lives, but also what happened to the people that came before us. And I like that burden as also a responsibility and a responsibility to the subsequent generations. So what kind of DNA do we want to pass to them? Hopefully it's been healed of our trauma.
Yes. Yes, yes. And that's why we do the work we do, is because we have been through the journey. And, you know, there are pieces that still come up for us. But we have gotten to a place where we can actually give back for the healing that we received. We can pass it forward because it is so necessary. And you may be thinking, okay, you know, something happened in the past, yet I'm not seeing the trauma in my own life, but it's there. It's coming out in relationships where you're sublimating your desires, where you're creating these relationships where you're actually taking forward the relationship. It looks different, but you're actually taking it forward, and you're just recreating the pattern of trauma to yourself, of sabotaging yourself. So it's not something, again, that you can just say, well, that happened years ago. It has no bearing on my life, because it changes who you are. That energy that happened to you when you were 5 years old or 8 years old or 16 or whatever age it happened for you, that leaves an imprint in your body. The energy cannot flow through your body because it's literally locked up in your body. So there are blocks in your body. So you can't actually have all of you. You can't actually be all of you because that energy is tied up in that event. And it also changed the trajectory of your life. So
right. That is a great segue into how is it that our rage can lead us to increased pleasure.
yes.
And because to me, the work that I do with my clients is so much predicated on getting them in touch with their anger. Or if they already have their anger, they know they're angry, but they're expressing it in ways that are very damaging and destructive, then to show them ways to manage their anger so that they can be connected to it, but they're not doing things that are harmful to themselves or other people. And the big impetus for that, for handling that anger, and not suppressing it, not denying it, not trying to get rid of it, but using it like the fire that it is to fuel positive things, is so that my clients can enjoy fabulous orgasms. Because I know that you cannot have the orgasmic, you can't fully realize your orgasmic potential if you are repressing anger. It's just not going to happen. If you push down an emotion, you end up pushing everything down, all the feelings. So your laughter doesn't go all the way down to your toes, and your orgasms don't take you out into orbit. Everything is on mute.
Yes.
So I really want to help people get in contact with their rage, in a beautiful, empowering way that heals them and their relationships and really catapults their relationship with their creativity and their erotic potential in a way that exceeds what a lot of people are capable of experiencing right now, because so many of us are deadened and numbed out.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And how do you actually help your clients be able to experience that rage in a way that is in a safe container?
Yeah.
You can create?
Well, there's steps that I take people on in anger management training, which are really vital. And some of it is kind of, we already know, take a breath. Okay. Well, there's a reason for that. You take a breath and it relaxes you a little bit. It very much contacts you, connects you with what you're feeling. A lot of times what will happen is we're feeling afraid, we're feeling sad, and we immediately thrust it into anger. And then we try to do something based upon that anger. So we're back into our reptilian brain, our amygdala. And it's not a very intelligent place to be. We're human beings. We've got all this other brain, but, you know, reptiles have a little tiny brain. And no offense to reptiles, I've met many that I love, but it's just not a very evolved brain structure. And when we're shoved back in that amygdala, we're not very evolved either. We do really stupid, self-defeating things and destructive things. And the amygdala or reptilian brain really only allows you to do flight, that means you run away, or fight, put them up, or freeze, just like don't do anything. That's what bunny rabbits do a lot of times, they freeze. Mm-hmm. And recently I heard that there's a fourth one, and I really appreciated having this added to that, and that's fawning. Now, not everybody knows what fawning means, so let me just explain. Fawning is where you are praising a potential perpetrator or somebody that might hurt you. You're trying to make them feel good about themselves so they won't harm you. So anyway, it's the 4 Fs. The 4 Fs that we go to when we're in this very unintelligent phase. So if I take a breath and I count to 10, which I know is very cliche, but if I actually do that, there's things that I can do that are very constructive in that moment. One of them is to get reconnected to my frontal cortex, the part of me that has an ability to think. And the other is that I can do an inventory and quickly try to figure out what's going on in my body and how that's relating to my emotions. You know, it's like, are my fists clenched, or are my jaw tight? Am I breathing way up here instead of down in my belly? What do all these symptoms mean? What is it communicating to me? Am I afraid? Or is it just rage? Or is there something else going on too? I need to know. And once I've done that, I've slowed things down, then I can ask myself, okay, what would be an intelligent thing to do in this moment? And sometimes I can't get there. Sometimes the best I'm going to be able to come up with is a timeout because I'm just too angry. Mm-hmm. I am too rocked back in my reptilian brain. But if I get a little bit of oxygen in there, give myself just a little bit of space and go, okay, let's take a timeout, then I can step away from the situation and I can start to process. And here's what's really important when you take a timeout. A lot of people don't do this. The couples I work with, they take a timeout by calling up a best friend and bitching about their partner. But what you really want to do is you want to go inside and connect with yourself in a very soothing way. Mm-hmm. So I need to talk to myself in self-soothing ways. I need to be my best friend. Because a lot of times when I'm acting out and I'm being angry, I am trying to get somebody to care about me and to give me what I think I need or want in that moment. Well, it's time I did that for me. So if I can take that time out and I can do something nice for myself and remind myself, I'm here for me, I love me, it's okay, I've got your back, I'm with you. There's a way in which it creates that nice, calm place again, where I can be a little more human around other people. And I got to remind myself that even if that person doesn't give me what I want and need, I'm going to get what I want and need from me. I don't have to control them. I don't have to demand that they bring me what I want and need. So there's a lot of other steps to anger management, but what I just ran through right there is tracking what happens in your body when you get angry, taking a breath, taking a time out, and changing your self-talk so that it's self-soothing. Too many times what happens is people really ramp themselves up going, that was horrible, that person's blah, 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 and they got all kinds of names for them, and then they want to find somebody who will empathize with them. And I understand that. I'm not saying there's never a time for that, but if you really want to be able to process your anger, you got to go in and start being your own best friend, loving yourself. And that will give you a nice, solid base from which to make decisions. And it may be that your decision is going to be that person's not safe. I don't want to be around that person anymore. Okay, but let's do that in a place where you aren't actually acting out your rage. There have to be some bottom lines too. Like my bottom lines are I don't get to flip other drivers off. Something I used to do before I had anger management. I love to flip people off. Well, it's very, very dangerous. You never know what somebody's got in their glove box. And it also was just, for me, a way of acting out my rage, and it always meant I was that much closer to doing other rageful things. Name calling, slamming doors, breaking things, throwing things, threatening. Those all have to be off the table. So that I know that those are behaviors that I have made a commitment not to engage in. And the timeout helps me not do those behaviors. But what do? I'm on my timeout, let's say, and I'm just so angry, and I don't know what to do with that rage. Well, a colleague of mine introduced me to this technique, and I teach it all the time now. I just love it. Here's the reason. I used to get in my car. I'd be driving down the road, and I would be yelling out my rage because it was stuck in my body. I needed to get it out. So I'd just scream at the top of my lungs because I knew that the other drivers couldn't hear me, and I wouldn't disturb the neighbors, and they wouldn't call the police. So the car was the place to do it. But the problem with that is, if I'm really going to get that close to that level of anger, I could be an unsafe driver. Okay? So I'm not recommending this at all. I'm just saying that this desire is here. And so then I have lots of clients who live in situations where they do have neighbors, and it would be very disturbing if they let out a scream. And yet, it feels so good to do that. It really does. And a lot of times on the other side of that scream, you will be able to contact your tears, the grief, because that needs to come too. So here's the tool. If you can see, it's just an ordinary hand towel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it up here. Hopefully y'all can see this. I roll it up into this nice tight little thing, and then I'm going to twist it like this. I'm going to twist it a couple of times so that it's really, really tight. And then I am going to put it in my mouth, and I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs. And you will hear a little bit of noise, but it's not going to be anything that would cause a neighbor to call the police. So right. Here. That's something. I have clients who actually keep one of these at their bedside, so that if they're really frustrated with their mate, they can go into the bedroom and scream into this towel.
Not hit them over the head with it, but scream into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, Sophia, I know that you were going to share something deep and soulful for us. Now that I've given everybody their comedy, you were going to take us into a deep and soulful practice. And I wonder if you could start off by telling us what it's called and what it's for.
Well, again, as you said, we have all these reactions to trauma. We freeze, or we run, or we have the trauma and we hold it in. Often that's where we have the trouble, is because, again, we're not letting it express. And again, it's energy and motion, and we've closed it off. When you look at the animal kingdom, when they've had, something where they've had to either freeze or run, then they'll stop when they're safe and they'll shake it off and then they'll be fine. But that's where we don't actually allow ourselves to feel that, is to feel that kind of frenetic energy and allowing it to vibrate through our cells and let go. So it's really about actually intensifying the feeling of it, because it is just all energy, and allowing yourself to feel it. I do a lot of energetic practices with myself and my clients, so that's kind of what I wanted to introduce, and just to actually start to feel it in a safe container where it's okay to actually feel it in your body, because then you can actually start to let it go.
Wow.
So it's really connecting to that, and let's try it out. So let's close our eyes and just come present in this moment. And I actually want you to just get a sense of where you are in this space. We're so often outside of our bodies, but I want you to come into your body. So just notice the temperature in the air. How does it feel on your skin? Are there any scents in the air? Whatever you're sitting on, a chair, couch, floor, bed, whatever it is, just feel that connection to your body. And then, as if you could open up a channel from the cosmos, just allowing a beautiful white gold energy to flow down, that's healing, that's nurturing, that is love from the divine. Just start to feel that. So opening up your crown chakra, the top of your head, allowing that to flow through each and every one of your cells. We actually want to fill your body. We want it to be satiated, to be nourished before we release, because so often we're coming from depletion. We're coming from stress. We're coming from a deficit. So we actually want to fill our bodies with this beautiful love and energy first. And then again, let that white gold energy flow through the room. It's filling up the room you're in, just bathing the room with love. The love from the divine. And it also allows you to be in a cocoon of sorts. So knowing this is a safe place, a safe container, you're surrounded by the love of the divine. And then turn your attention to your body. And I want you to turn your awareness to the anger, to the rage. Perhaps you can feel it. Perhaps it's so sublimated that you cannot. But if you could, where would it be in your body? And I actually want to magnify that sensation. So as if you could turn a dial, because again, everything is energy, including you and your body. So just allow that to turn up and allow it to feel and to vibrate through your body. Again, you are in a safe space. It cannot cause any harm to you or to anyone else. And again, I want to magnify it. So we're actually going to open up your feet chakras, which is the bottom of your feet. And I want you to actually bring in the energy from the earth. So think how much anger the earth could have for its son or daughter being hurt. Even the earth itself has been raped and pillaged. But to know that the Mother Earth, her son or daughter has been hurt, I want you to actually bring in that anger. So feel that rumbling, allow it to, again, vibrate through your feet and vibrate through your body. Again, you're safe, but we're magnifying this intensity. And everyone feels energy differently. If you feel it, that's wonderful. If you don't, just know that it is taking place. This energy is vibrating through you. And now turn your awareness to your womb. This is the area of our power, our confidence, our desires. This is the creation energy. Your living life force is in this kind of cauldron of your womb. And this is what we actually want to set on fire. So Veronica mentioned earlier that anger can be fuel, and that's exactly what we wish to do. So as you absorb all this energy that has been vibrating through your body, actually pull it from each and every one of your cells, from your fields, and direct that into your womb space. The womb has limitless capacity, limitless space. And again, it is where you create. So we're actually pulling from each and every one of your cells, and just have that intention that the anger, the rage, the hurt, the despair, the hopelessness, the fear, anything tied to these traumas, just allow it to go into your womb. Again, you are being aided by the earth and by the divine. You are safe, you are protected. So again, all of that energy is bubbling up in your womb. And as if you could see a match out in front of you. It has a diamond tip, which we are diamond light as divine beings. And strike that match and light that on fire. See it burst to life. See it start to purify that energy. Again, all energy, all emotions, all feelings, our literal bodies are energy. So allowing that energy to be purified in this fire. And then for the purposes of this class, let's drop in what we actually desire. So again, we're dropping it into the fire. So it's now becoming fuel. So dropping in healing, dropping in love, first of all with our self-love, dropping in those healthy boundaries, Dropping in having our needs and desires met. Dropping in the cultivation of the habits that will actually create what we desire. No longer letting anything like this happen again. Dropping in trust of ourselves, of the universe, of others, and whatever else you'd like to drop in. And then as if that cauldron, the womb that's on fire with these desires, as if it could kind of tip over and flow out of your back, it actually starts to push you forward. It's actually like an afterburner effect, like a rocket. It's actually pushing you forward into your future, into having what you desire. Knowing that your energy has now been transmuted. What was ready to let go is now being used for creation, for what you actually desire. And then allowing more of that white gold energy to again fill each and every one of your cells. Allowing the earth to gift you any energies, any frequencies, any nutrients that your particular body requires, so that you feel full, that you're giving from overflow, so that you're nourished and loved. And again, just turning your awareness again to the simple practice in this simple moment. Again, noticing your body in this space, the spatial awareness of the sense, the temperature, the feeling of your body. And just saying an internal thanks for coming into this space and saying yes to the healing and saying yes to the transmutation of this energy. And whenever you'd like, you can open your eyes.
Wow. That was very deep. I feel renewed. Thank you, Sophia.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Wow. So I'm wondering if we have any comments below we want to respond to, or possibly on the live.
Just a couple highs thus far. I don't know if does anyone have any questions in this space? For those of you who are watching on Facebook, is there any questions that are coming up for you about your own personal story and how you actually shift out of it, or something that actually you'd like to share with others that works for you?
Yeah. And while we're waiting for those comments, I think I'd like for us to circle back to Me Too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe talk a little bit about how what we've been talking about actually applies to that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about Me Too, what next, right?
Yes.
And what comes to mind for me is that I think Tarana Burke was the one who came up with the Me Too hashtag, and she said something not too long ago about how the shame was being transferred from the women to the men, and she thought that was a good thing, that the men were the ones who deserved that shame. And as you know, Sophia, I'm the shame-free zone, so I'm not wanting anybody to have shame, actually. What I'm wanting is for all of this to come out in the open so that we can start healing it, and all of us can learn about healthy assertion skills and boundaries. And, so if one has had a Me Too moment, and my God, I'm hard-pressed to find any woman who has not had a Me Too moment. There are some who are not joining the chorus because they just don't really want to talk about it, and I honor and respect that. But every woman I've ever talked to has had some kind of a Me Too moment. I just had one actually at the place where I went and got my car smogged. The guy I thought was being very professional, and just as I was getting into my car and getting ready to leave, and I'd already paid him to smog my car, he decided to tell me a joke about gonorrhea. Which I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Why are you telling me this? And so, you know, that is kind of obviously very minor compared to other perpetrations. But as an incest survivor and a date rape survivor, I have to say I find moments like that incredibly infuriating. I don't find them to be minor at all. The whole thing, this idea that somehow or another women are constantly being sexualized against their will is infuriating. Infuriating to live in a culture like that. And I see the Me Too movement really thrusting us into a new culture where those things are just not going to be tolerated. So, Sophia, how do you see creating that balance between that fire of this movement, which is shifting the culture and redefining what we find acceptable treatment of women, with each individual woman's need to heal herself so that she's not living with ongoing rage and resentment? Mm-hmm. And it's a two-part question. Also, how do we have our rage without it spilling over into perpetrations and shaming of the perpetrator? I have some answers to that question first. First, I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that. What do you think about it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think, you know, when we first talked about this, that's how sacred rage, that's why we named it sacred rage, because it's not about not feeling it. It's not about becoming a doormat and just letting it happen. The difference between vengeful and blaming rage is that you are expressing it out towards someone or towards something. So you're actually just keeping the pattern going. Whereas sacred rage is you can be angry and truthful in the moment, as in, that doesn't work for me, this has to stop. And it's sharp because it's true, it's truth in the moment, yet it's not harming anyone. Mm-hmm. Because it's just truth. So it is about knowing yourself. What are your boundaries? What is actually required for you to be able to articulate when something doesn't work for you? It is about having that healing for yourself so that it doesn't bubble up somewhere else. Because if it's still within you, it's going to come up some other way. Whether it's an addiction, like, you know, a shopping addiction, or drinking, or promiscuous behavior, or the way you treat someone else, or, you know, there's a million different ways it can come out, but it will come out. So it's really actually first addressing it, acknowledging it, that it is okay to be angry, but how then can you heal it? And of course, we mentioned a couple different ways. You know, I went the spiritual route, Veronica went the therapeutic route, and then we combine those as our healing continues. So it's whatever works for you, but find what works for you and actually address it. Don't let it build. Don't let it cut off who you are. Because if you're not, as Veronica mentioned earlier, if you're not actually allowing that, you're actually tamping down all your other emotions. So if you don't have your full range of emotion in anger, you don't have your full range of emotion in anything else either.
Yeah, that's so true. What I want to say about that is that I really think that for me, finding ways to turn my anger into activism has been really empowering and fulfilling. And so if I volunteered for a center against rape and domestic violence when I was in college. This was part of what I did with my anger. And then I became a relationship coach, also another thing that I did with my anger. Was I angry when I chose to become a relationship coach? No, but I had undergone my own journey around learning how to manage my anger in ways that were healthy and learning how to have assertion skills. And I saw so much value in that and saw how it transformed my life that I wanted to be able to bring that to other people. So there's a way in which also I see a culture that I think is not working for a lot of us. And rather than just stay in my anger and frustration about that, I'm looking for positive expressions of how I can be a force for shifting that towards something that's more uplifting and healing for all of us. So I think about the women who were very upset about how this most recent election went, and they organized the Women's March, and that was anger that fueled the Women's March. But when I go to the Women's March, I don't see angry faces. I see an incredible, I mean, just hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands, really, of beautiful, happy people whose anger catalyzed an action that said, we're not going to put up with this. This is not acceptable. And whatever it is, you know, the Women's March may not be your thing, but something else, people who get out and do take action to try to change the world. Maybe it's working for Habitat, you know, where they go out and they build homes. I think they call that Habitat for Humanity. Probably the person who started that was feeling some righteous rage about homelessness. I think the same thing has happened with animal rights movements and movements to get water to the people who don't have water. It's usually starting with that's just not okay. I can't stand for that. And then transferring that anger into an action that's positive and constructive and uplifting for everybody concerned. That's the trajectory that I see. But the only way that can happen is we can't go into self-hatred. And this is an interesting thing about the anger cul-de-sac. I think when people get stuck in their anger, a lot of times it's self-hatred. It's just going in this loop. Like, well, there's nothing I can ever do. It's just me. Everything's against me. It's always been that way. It'll never change. That kind of a tape keeps people really stuck. Sophia, would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. And it's a choice, though. And that's where you require to decide whether you want to stay in that, whether you're committed to the spin, or whether you're committed to actually, as you say, getting into an action that brings you out of it. And I love that you brought out that it is an action, because again, action is movement. You want to get that energy in motion in some way. So yes.
Right. And for creative types, there's somebody who doesn't want to be a political activist of some sort, doesn't want to start a movement or a cause. Creativity. Creativity oftentimes comes from frustration and anger. People write beautiful books. They paint paintings. I've seen paintings that looked angry. That's for sure. Right? So what are some of the ways that that you have seen people take their anger and channel it into their creativity in a positive way?
Yes. Well, again, it is just energy. So, as you say, people who are creative, they often become entrepreneurs. They see something that's broken that could be easier, and they actually create around that. They want to actually channel that energy into making something work better. You know, I mean, actually, that's why I got into coaching, is because I actually wanted to help children. I was like, all right, how can I help a child address this problem at like 4 or 11 or 17 rather than getting to be an adult and having it compounded?
Right.
And what I had to learn is, I was like, well, why am I coaching adults then? But there's actually, when the trauma happened, that's where they're still reacting from.
You're still dealing with children, aren't you?
Yes, yes. So that's how I did it. I have others who, you know, they create programs for children, or as you said, for the homeless. They become yoga teachers. They do write those books that are meant to inspire, to show someone that they're not alone, that someone else has gone through this and you can create past it. Like there is life after this event or this, you know, pattern that's happened. So being able to, again, go into the action piece in whatever way this speaks to you, whether it's entrepreneur or becoming a doctor, or maybe it is something, you know, maybe you want to go and take one of those foam bats and beat on something. You know, it's fun.
Or get your tool.
But do something that is in the active motion of getting it out. And then, okay, then what's my next step? And with your intuition, it will give you the next step, because we don't have these experiences by happenstance. You know, the reason we do what we do is because we have these experiences. So whatever experience you've had, you can actually use it to help others.
Yeah, and that, I think that is always a beautiful thing to do with our pain. If we have suffered, and most of us have suffered in some way, to take that pain and use it to help others is such a beautiful gift to yourself. Really. And that could be expressed in a painting or a sculpture. Or a book, or some kind of textile creation. It can be expressed in so many things. When we step into service, obviously motherhood is a form of service too. So there's lots of beautiful ways that we can use our anger to really fully connect with our true path. And I think that's one of the things that I like to think of anger as a weather vane, which points me in the direction of my true path. My anger kind of lets me know when I'm getting off my path, that I have developed friendships or connections that no longer serve me, that I've engaged in behaviors that are not serving me, that I'm allowing certain transgressions on my person or my space that aren't serving me, that I'm not speaking my truth and that's not serving me, but that the anger, it just lets me know there's something wrong. It's like an alarm on the car, you know, one of those little things that comes up on the dashboard and says, in the check engine light. My anger in a lot of ways is a check engine light. It's like, okay, I want to get curious now and find out what's going on. And then make a decision about how I'm going to change my course and my trajectory, which requires me not to be angry. So, so okay, check engine light has come on. I'm angry. I need to extirpate that energy. So maybe I'll get my towel and do that. But as far as what I'm going to do about the situation, that requires calm, logic, an ability to really show up and look at my situation and decide, what do I want to do next? And I can see where some expressions, some artistic expressions actually are kind of help us get there. So writing poetry, journaling, knitting. I don't knit, so I was just a guess. Like painting and sculpture, I could see where that could really get you into expressing your anger and being able to move into something. But I suppose somebody out there has knitted in an angry way.
Well, maybe just stay away from the needles when you're angry.
Exactly. Sophia, I noticed we're past the hour, and I'm thinking we need to check in and see if we're going to keep going or if we need to bring this to a close. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't see any questions coming up, so it's in the space of maybe any final thoughts on how we can actually take our anger and maybe what your personal next step is.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did want to add just one thing about in Me Too, What Next? I think it's so important that we don't just transfer shame from women to men. Or from victims to perpetrators. I'm really looking for us to shift the paradigm away from shame entirely so that we can start having conversations about perpetrations across the board and across genders. I recently co-facilitated a men's group on Me Too, and there were men admitting that they had perpetrated Me Too moments, and there were men who were speaking about being perpetrated against, and not always by men. Oftentimes it was a man who had perpetrated against a man, but sometimes it was a woman. And there's a way in which I hope that we can open our filters a little bit and stop gendering the topics and just start looking at violations of personal space and sexual perpetrations. And I realize that you and I today have really been focused on the feminine perspective. But next Saturday, we're going to be talking about the masculine perspective. And for both masculine and feminine, you and I approach this from a gender neutral perspective. We're not necessarily saying that any particular human body has this particular mix of masculine or feminine. We all have some mix of masculine and feminine. We really want to just honor all of that in all of us. And shame, in my experience, only leads to more perpetrations. So when we shame each other, we cause the very thing that we're trying to end to become persistent. So I think to be angry, to have that righteous rage about these perpetrations is essential. I think I'm so glad that this Me Too moment has arrived. And at the same time, I want to see us move in a direction where we are going to start having conversations about the different perspectives, because there's also these areas where people are unclear about what's appropriate and inappropriate, and people have different sensibilities about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. So to be able to move into a place of also being willing to be curious. Yeah, and Sophia, can you hear me?
And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Trying a new third-party medium with Facebook has been interesting, to say the least. So we appreciate your staying with us and your patience with this, and a very vital topic.
Well, I'm still here, even though you can't hear me or see me.
The trials and tribulations of live broadcast, and we'll have to see if we want to do this next Saturday. So again, as Veronica was saying, next Saturday we will be hosting this again for the masculine perspective, because again, we have actually been more focused on the feminine, but again, Veronica and I, we both work with men and women, and we know it happens to both. There's the anger for both. There's the not knowing what to do. You know, I've had gentlemen tell me, now I'm not sure how to act. You know, what's appropriate in this time. And that also adds to the anger. So just wanting to bring this conversation forward, hopefully more seamless with technology. But I really want to thank you from both Veronica and myself for joining the conversation on what is next, on how you can actually shift out of your anger and begin to use it as a catalyst for what's next. So I again want to thank you. Again, sorry for the technology issues, but I want to thank you so much for being here. And leave us a message, send us a private message, or even on the Facebook post. You can also connect via our websites. Mine is nurturingdivinebeauty.com, and Veronica is theshamefreezone.com. So connect to us, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Ciao for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.